Hello, this is Josiah Winslow recording for his Data Structures and Programming class at METC for instructor Mark Cribb. Now, I'm kind of excited for this one today. We are going to be looking at queues and stacks, and we are going to be implementing something using them. So, before I implemented a singly linked list in this really long file, but also, since our last class time, I've implemented a doubly linked list, which I won't go into too much detail about, but there are a few differences between it and a singly linked list, which make it important for what I'm using it for. The singly linked list only had a head. This also has a tail. And that makes things pretty easy. You can actually iterate through this in reverse by starting at the tail and going to the previous node every time. Also, we are able to append and prepend in constant time, in the same amount of time. And I've made some of these slightly different to account for the fact that it's a doubly linked list. And one thing that's also different between a singly linked list and a doubly linked list is a doubly linked list only has one type of cycle. One where the tail connects to the head and the head connects to the tail. So this was really easy to account for. And all of this make it really easy to implement the stack and queue. The stack, in this case, is a stack is a singly linked list, and every time I push an item onto the stack, I prepend an item to the list, and every time I pop an item from the stack, I pop an item from the front of the list. And I can also peek at the top value of the stack without removing it. There we are. And this function I have called doOperation. It takes a function called func and an integer called arity, and basically it takes this many arguments, pops them from the stack, passes them to func, and then the result of that, or results, if as the case may be, it takes those and pushes them back onto the stack. So this is a really simple piece of code, and this has been useful for me every time I have had to use a stack, including this time, so that's why I included it. And the queue right here is a doubly linked list. And every time you enqueue an item, you append it to the back. And every time you dequeue an item, you pop from the front. And you can also peek at the top value of the queue without dequeuing or removing it. So, now we get to the examples. So here we have a short little RPN calculator that's less than 100 lines. And as you can see right here, here are some functions that we are going to be using with doOperation, which takes one value and returns a duplicate of it, takes one value and returns nothing, and then takes one value and returns them, or takes two values rather, and returns them swapped around. So here are the legal operations. We're going to be checking for these strings, plus, minus, asterisk, slash, %, etc. And then we're going to be taking this. I've got a tuple of a function and an integer here, and we're going to be passing those as the func and the arity to doOperation on the stack. And the operator module, which is built in Python, gives handy little functions for each of these operations. And for factorial and square root, I did this from the math module. And if we didn't have these, we could probably use like a lambda expression. And I have this working on integers, by the way. That's why I have floor division and integer square root. So here you have a stack called stack, and then we just run through this testing suite forever. We print the stack, print out all the valid operations, ask for an integer or operation as input, and if we got an integer, we push it. Otherwise, we try do operation on it, and for whatever reason, if the do operation fails, then we print out the error message and say press any key to continue. So let's try that out. So let's push a few numbers. And by the way, the top of the stack is right here on the bottom. Makes sense, right? Now, I did that because, for example, if you were to do, for example, the minus operation right here, it would do 50 minus 3, not 3 minus 50. And I thought this ordering would make it clearer. So 50 minus 3, 47. What's 39 times 47? 1,833. And let's swap these. What's 1,833 to the power of 28? That number, apparently. And let's see. What's the square root of this number? Apparently something about half as long. Makes sense. And what is this number modulo 4? So I gotta swap modulo. And apparently it's 1. And finally, let's swap. Let's do the little squiggly line, which I made it flip the sign. Let's add these. And this is what should happen when I do the square root, is we should get some sort of error saying that we can't do a negative square root. And there we are. I square root argument must be non-negative. So let's make that non-negative. And there we go. The square root, or at least the integer part of the square root, was 5. And now let's pop. And this goes on forever, by the way, so I should keyboard interrupt out of it. Alright. And now, we get to the interesting part. So, Mr. Crib, I told you that thing about how your bacon number is at most 4, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So, a bacon number is basically how connected you are to Kevin Bacon. Now, is this going to be... There we are. Oh, short article. I could have sworn there was another one. There we are. So, basically, if you have worked with Kevin Bacon directly on a movie, you have a Bacon number of 1. If you have worked with somebody who has worked with Kevin Bacon, you have a Bacon number of 2. If you have worked with someone who's worked with someone who has worked with Kevin Bacon, you have a Bacon number of 3, and so on and so forth. And, for example, Elvis Presley was in Change of Habit with Edward Asner, and Edward Asner was in JFK with Kevin Bacon. So this means that Edward Asner has a Bacon number of 1, and Elvis Presley has never directly worked with Kevin Bacon, but he has worked with someone who's worked with Kevin Bacon, so that means he has a Bacon number of 2. And another example it gives, Ian McKellen was in X-Men Days of Future Past with Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy, and McAvoy and Fassbender were in X-Men First Class with Kevin Bacon. So it's a really interesting game, and you know what else is really interesting? The fact that Mr. Cribb, of all people, has an IMDb account. Or, not account, IMDb page. He has been in something called Deception Streets. That's right, this is really him. I actually had to ask him if this was him, and it was, and I was really surprised. And so apparently it's a short, and it's got all of these people in it. And as you can see, here we have Mr. Cribb in his role as Officer John. Now, I don't know where to see this, but I look forward to being able to see it. More to the point, though, we can use that, the fact that he has an IMDb page, to calculate his Bacon number. Except, not really. I had to do it in an indirect way, but I'll show you what I mean. So, here we have an object called a cinema goer, which is basically a member of this IMDb module. It used to be called IMDb Pi, but now it's called cinema goer. And I use it to get an actor's name and convert it to an IMDb ID, because beforehand I cooked up 2 JSON files, actors.json and movies.json, and very basically they contain actor and movie IDs, and you can get the names out of them, and also what movies they starred in, or whoever starred in those movies, as a list. I pre-cooked these up. They come out to about 100 or more than 100 megabytes each. I think 250 megabytes altogether. It takes like 12 seconds to load, but it's worth it. Yeah, so I'm getting them from IMDb, and I should mention that the version of the downloadable datasets that IMDb gives out are incomplete, and I can't get a complete version unless I've contributed a certain amount to IMDb, which I'm not going to do in a single day. You can't make me. But this has all these associations, which I load into memory all at one time. And then here I have a helper function to input a string, and and I return an actor ID from it. So here, I keep asking for... I'm not gonna go over this one in detail, by the way, just like at a high level. I keep asking for a string until the search on IMDb for that string gives at least one person. I take those results and truncate them to a certain length, if they're over that certain length. And then for each of those people, I output their name, and I get their biography and output it at a maximum of 300 characters. Which, by the way, I'm really surprised that this function right here, which is a very useful text shortening function, I'm surprised that this was in the standard library. But it is. It's in the TextWrap module. Sorry. And so if you only got one result, it uses that result and gets its ID. Otherwise, it asks you for an index from 1 to 10, or 1 to however many, and then it gets that one to use for you. Alright. So now, this is where the magic happens. This is where we take some destination actor, the actor that we want to find the Bacon number of, and the source actor, which by default will be Kevin Bacon. But this can really be any actor that is in our database. So this is where the queue comes in. This is going to store all of the actors that we have not looked at, because this is going to be a breadth first search, and we're basically we're stepping down the tree of actors and movies top to bottom instead of left to right. So here we have a queue for the actors, a set for each of the movies we've already processed, because we're not processing a movie twice. And we also have a dictionary of connections, which is basically this actor has been in this movie with this person, and this is going to be what we use to get the actual path that we have just walked down. We initialize a Boolean that's false initially. That represents whether or not we found a path yet. We put the source actor, the Kevin Bacon, into the queue, and then while the queue is non-empty, we dequeue the first actor in our queue, and if we don't have it in our database, we go on to the next one. And then we take all the movies from this actor, randomly shuffle them. I don't technically have to randomly shuffle them, but I like it. I like doing it. It gives me different results every time. And then I search through each of those movies. If we've already seen them, then we add the movie. And it just occurred to me that I didn't do a check for whether or not we actually have the movie in our database, but I haven't run into any problems so far. So we take all of the cast of that movie, we randomly shuffle it, and then for each of those actors in each of those movies, we go through and go to the next actor if they don't exist or we've seen him before, and then we add this connection right here, the actor that we are currently looking at is a co-star with our co-star, and then we put the co-star on the queue, and we're going to process it way later. However, if this co-star happens to be the actor we're looking for, we found a path, and we can clear the queue so that the loop actually exits. And then we also need to do this to exit the movie loop. And at this point, if we haven't found a path, we return none. Otherwise, we walk through the path back to the source actor, and we get all those connections in a list, and then we return it. So that's where the magic happens. And this is just a boilerplate. Enter a starting actor, enter an ending actor, get their names, get the bacon path, which is what I call it, get bacon path. And if the bacon path exists, output it really pretty. Otherwise, output the fact that we don't have a path really pretty. And so, let's actually try this out. So it'll take about 12 seconds to load, which will give me enough time to look up Deception Streets on IMDb on my phone, and look at the cast. So, what we have here is a list of people. There's, if you can see it, Renee Galinas, Ernest Marshall, Andrea Ward, Charles Jake Johnson, Arturo Rangel, Rye King, Sidney Ginyard, Mark Cribb, that's right, Mark Sanchez, Barbara Lizette Sanchez, and so on and so forth. Now, one limitation of the database that I'm using is that even though it lists Mark Cribb in the list of actors, and it lists Deception Street in its list of titles, it does not list the fact that Mark Cribb was in Deception Street. But it does list 10 other people. And I was able to test all of them, and I was able to figure out that Mr. Cribb's bacon number is at most 4, and I'm going to show you what I mean later. So first, I'm just going to show you Mark Cribb. I could not do this, I couldn't do this with Mark Cribb. Yeah, so the requested actor is not in the database. Please try again. And I got rid of any actors that aren't credited in anything in the database. So, let's go through and let's start with Renee Galinas. And as you can see, it outputs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as indices, and it outputs their name and a short biography, which would be cut off if it's too long. So we enter a number from 1 to 5. Let's do number 1 because that's the Renee Galinas we mean. And let's see her bacon number, so I'm going to leave this blank. So right now it's calculating, and there we are. So Renee Galinas was in Deception Streets with Andrea Ward, who was in The Amazing Mr. F with T.I., who I believe is the rapper, T.I., who was in Making of an Ant-Sized Heist, a how-to guide with Michael Douglas, who was in Oliver Stone Inside Out with Kevin Bacon. So, right now the fact that Renee Galinas was linked with Andrea Ward through Deception Streets, that tells us that Mark Cribb is probably going to have a bacon number of 4, or at most 4 anyways, if we did have a full database. And in fact, Andrea Ward with a bacon number of 3 is the smallest bacon number I could find on the Deception Street cast. So let's do Andrea Ward to Kevin Bacon. It should give us 3, and because of the randomness, it should give us a different connection than the Amazing Mr. F, Making of an Ant-Sized Heist, and Oliver Stone, and here we are. Andrea Ward was in The Amazing Mr. F with Columbus Short, who was in Armored with Matt Dillon, who was in Hollywood Waterloo with Kevin Bacon. And let's try another one of the co-stars, Ernest Marshall, on Deception Streets. And I mean the first one, to Kevin Bacon. So Ernest Marshall was in Betrayed with Trey Ireland, who was in David E. Talbot Presents A Fool and His Money with Michael Beach, who was in End of the Line with Kevin Bacon. Now, as far as I'm aware, this is the only connection that Ernest Marshall has to Kevin Bacon that is of at most this size. But if you were to repeat the calculation, like say with Andrea Ward, whoop, I didn't mean to do that. Why not? So I just did Andrew Garfield because he happened to be on the list. So Andrew Garfield has a Kevin Bacon number of 2. He was in Heroes and Villains, The World of the Amazing Spider-Man with Emma Davids, who was in Murder on the First with Kevin Bacon. Okay, so let's actually try Andrea Ward this time. And Andrea Ward, I mean the first one, to Kevin Bacon. So each time we should get a different result for this. Andrea Ward was in The Amazing Mr. F with Columbus Short, who was in Armored with Matt Dillon, who was in Wild Things with Kevin Bacon. And I believe I mentioned this specific one to you on Discord, Mr. Cribb. And let's see if we try it again. We should get a different connection that is of the same length, if one exists. There we are. Andrea Ward was in The Amazing Mr. F with T.I., who was in American Gangster Hip-Hop Infusion with Brian Grazer, who was in Lost Moon, The Triumph of Apollo 13 with Kevin Bacon. And the great part is, this doesn't only work with Kevin Bacon. This works with anyone. For example, let's try Zendaya. To Tom Holland. Now, Zendaya was the MJ to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, so it should give a... Zendaya has a Tom Holland number of 1. There we are. She was in some Spider-Man thing with him. But we can also do it between other actors. For example, Keanu Reeves. Let's see, and I mean the first one. Keanu Reeves to Willem Dafoe. And I mean the first one. Okay, apparently they were in something together. Wow. Keanu Reeves was in John Wick with Willem Dafoe. How did I not know that? Let's do... Let's try Zac Efron. And we are going to do Zac Efron to... Let's say Dan Povenmire. Now, I know from experience that this should probably be 2, because Zac Efron was in High School Musical with Ashley Tisdale, who was in Phineas and Ferb with Dan Povenmire. Okay, apparently there is also a different connection. Zac Efron was in a High School Musical 3 thing with Lucas Grabeel, who played Ryan in High School Musical, who was in the Phineas and Ferb show with Dan Povenmire. Must have been like a TV special. Alright, let's try something a little crazy. Let's try... Let's try Fred Durst. And I mean the first one, with Neve Campbell. And I mean the first one. Fred Durst has a Neve Campbell number of 2. So Fred Durst was in Play Dead with Jake Busey, who was in Lost Junction with Neve Campbell. Alright, and we're going to try just one more. We're going to do Linnea Quigley. And this time it's giving us only one result for Linnea Quigley, so it's using the only result. And Linnea Quigley to Joe Biden. Why not? And Joe Biden, by the way, does have an IMDb page because he is technically an actor. He was in a movie, or he was in movies. And Linnea Quigley has a Joe Biden number of 3. Linnea Quigley was in some Playboy thing, which I didn't know, with Willie Nelson, who was in Immaculate Funk with Aretha Franklin, who was in Nightline, Barack Obama elected 44th president with Joe Biden, And there you go. So I think this little tool I made is pretty interesting, and I think it's pretty effective. Like, I was able to find most people's Bacon numbers or other actor numbers pretty fast with this, and I like that I was able to use a queue with this in a way that I can understand. So yeah, with that out of the way, I've pushed all these to my GitHub, which, in order to push the large JSON files on there, I had to download this extra special thing to work with Git for it, but I was able to do it anyways. And I hope you can try this out on your machine and enter in different actors' names and see how it works for you. I think it was pretty fun to play with. So yeah, take care.